Elena Torres tightened the brim of her officer's cap as she stepped onto the sidewalk beneath the scorching midday sun in downtown Mexico City. Right in front of her sat a sleek silver sports car, gleaming under the sunlight. The kind of car she'd only seen in glossy magazines, never in real life. But no matter how dazzling it looked, it was parked right beneath a no parking sign. "This car can't be here," she muttered, not loud, but firm, as if reminding herself more than anyone else. Elena exhaled, pulled out her citation notebook, and began noting down the vehicle's information. This was her 18th infraction of the day, a long shift like any other, filled with heat, smog, and the usual scornful glares from impatient drivers. Yet something about this car kept her attention, not just its luxury, but the strange sense that it didn't belong on this street. The soft hum of an electric window broke her concentration. Elena didn't look up immediately. She knew the drill: stay professional, stay grounded. "Officer, is there a problem?" A male voice, deep, calm, courteous, but carrying that hint of confidence from someone used to being accommodated. "You're parked in a restricted zone," Elena replied, eyes still on her notebook. "I'm issuing a citation." "It was just for a moment. I had to take an urgent call," the man explained. Not rushed, not defensive. Elena paused. Something in his tone made her finally raise her gaze. He looked to be in his mid-30s, tall, angular features and dark eyes. Not flawless, but captivating. His hair was slightly tousled and his light blue shirt a bit wrinkled. Not like someone trying to impress, but like a man carrying a quiet storm within. And in that moment, even with her pen still poised over the page, Elena felt her heartbeat stumble, just slightly out of rhythm. Elena closed her citation book and handed the man the ticket like she had countless times before. "You can pay it online or at the traffic office," she said in a neutral tone, giving nothing away. And yet, her heart was still racing, not from fear, but from something harder to name, something that lingered in the look he had given her. "Thank you, Officer Torres," he replied, glancing briefly at her name tag. The gratitude sounded genuine, no sarcasm, no resistance. A rare thing. Elena turned away, resuming her patrol, but all afternoon, her mind couldn't seem to shake that name, Daniel Reyes. Elsewhere, inside the quiet, leather-scented cabin of his car, Daniel sat motionless behind the wheel. The freshly written ticket lay on the passenger seat. He stared at it, but his thoughts were far from the fine. All he could see was the young woman with steady eyes and a firm voice that didn't waver in front of him. Elena Torres, not the kind of woman to bow her head, not someone to be impressed by wealth or looks. He leaned back, closing his eyes. That morning his brother had called, their father's health had worsened, and everything else in his day had spiraled. The investor meeting forgotten, but Elena's voice, her calm presence, her fairness, had somehow pulled him out of the spin. He, Daniel Reyes, CEO of a major investment firm, the man used to controlling every room he walked into, had been quietly shaken by a traffic officer who looked him in the eye and didn't flinch. Meanwhile, Elena stood in front of her mirror after her shift, staring not at her reflection, but through it, not checking her appearance, but asking herself, what did I see in those eyes? Maybe it was sadness, maybe honesty, or maybe it was herself, reflected back in someone else's gaze. The next morning, Elena didn't think much about the day before. The city was still crowded, the traffic still noisy, and she was still a part of the same spinning wheel, blowing whistles, writing tickets, keeping order. But when she entered the traffic office to file her shift report, she froze. Daniel Reyes was sitting in the waiting area. No designer suit, no flashy car. He wore a simple button-down shirt and jeans, holding the very ticket she had written. Their eyes met. Daniel stood, slightly awkward but clearly purposeful. "Good morning, Officer Torres," he began, his eyes carrying something unusual, like he had debated this moment endlessly before arriving. "Good morning," Elena replied, unable to hide her surprise. "I didn't expect to see you here." "To be honest, I wasn't sure I'd come either," Daniel admitted. "I could have paid online, but..." He paused, then offered a small, careful smile. Thought I'd do this in person." Elena tilted her head, cautious but intrigued. "Do what exactly?" Daniel lifted the ticket. "Pay the fine, but also, I was hoping to ask if you'd join me for a cup of coffee. Just a conversation, no pressure, no expectations." Elena was silent for a moment. Her instinct was to decline. She was used to hollow compliments and men who thought charm could soften the rules. But Daniel was different. He wasn't begging, wasn't flirting. He just wanted to talk. "My shift ends at 6, she said, voice even. "I usually take a break at a small cafe near the town square." "So, would it be all right if I met you at 6:30? Daniel asked, like he didn't want to disturb whatever balance hung between them. Elena nodded. "If I show up, it'll be just a conversation, 1 hour, nothing more." "That's all I'm hoping for," Daniel smiled. And this time, his eyes said more than the invitation itself. The small cafe sat tucked between two aging buildings, its warm yellow lights spilling softly through frosted glass. Elena stepped in at 6:28. Not early, not late. She wasn't sure what to expect. A simple conversation, maybe just a polite gesture. But Daniel was already there, seated by the window with 2 cups of coffee in front of him. One black, one with milk. He smiled as she walked in. "Wasn't sure how you take it, so I guessed both." Elena sat down, nodded slightly. "I drink it black." Lucky me, he slid the right cup toward her. "I hate wasting things." At first, their conversation was light. Weather, traffic, work. But soon, both seemed to want something deeper. A passing comment from Daniel opened a hidden door. "I can't remember the last time I just sat like this. No phone, no rush, no need to perform." Elena looked at him for a moment. "I can't remember the last time someone asked, 'Are you tired?' and didn't just mean, 'Can you keep going?'" They were silent, but not awkward. It was a silence that allowed space for truth. Daniel spoke of growing up in a working-class neighborhood, of his late mother who worked as a seamstress and always said, "Never think you're less than anyone." Elena shared her own teenage years growing up after her father left, watching her mother and younger sister carry on. "Sometimes I think fairness is a luxury," she sighed. "But then I realized fairness isn't for others to notice. It's for me, so I don't lose who I am." Daniel nodded. "I think that's why I came looking for you. Not because of the ticket, but because I couldn't stop thinking about the way you looked at me, not with fear, not with admiration, just human to human." Elena smiled. "I never thought I'd be sitting like this talking to someone I cited, but it turns out it was a pretty memorable citation." They both laughed, and when the clock struck 8, neither moved. The hour had long passed, but neither of them seemed eager to mention it. 2 days later, Elena received a message from Daniel. "If you don't mind, I'd like to take you somewhere special. Not a restaurant, not fancy, just a place I go to breathe. Sunday 4 p.m. Elena stared at the screen. She should decline, but somehow her fingers typed a short reply. "Okay." They met at the city's edge. Daniel wasn't driving the Aston Martin. Instead, it was an old olive green Jeep, dusty but somehow more real. "My brother's car," he explained. "I thought it suited the place I'm taking you." Elena smiled. "I like it. It has character." They left the city behind, heading into the hills, where the sun dipped slowly behind lines of trees. After about 30 minutes, Daniel pulled over near a narrow dirt trail, shaded by pines. "From here, we walk a bit," he said. "I'm not exactly a delicate princess," Elena grinned. They walked in silence, the crunch of leaves and distant birdsong their only companions. At the end of the path, the trail opened up into a natural overlook, a quiet balcony above the city. The skyline stretched below them, bathed in a soft lavender hue. Elena stood still. "Oh my God, this place!" "I came here the first time when I was 17, Daniel said, laying down a small blanket. "My mother had just passed away. I needed to escape." He poured hot chocolate from a thermos, handing her a cup. "She used to say no view is complete without a little hot cocoa." Elena chuckled, touched. They sat side by side, watching the sun descend. No need for many words. only that rare silence between two people who no longer feel the need to pretend. "Do you know why I brought you here?" Daniel asked softly. Elena shook her head. "Because this is where I come to remember who I really am. And you, somehow, made me remember the version of me I'd forgotten." Elena looked at him, her chest tightening. "You made me realize it's been a long time since I lived for myself, not just for duty." They didn't speak after that. But as the last light vanished behind the hills, Daniel reached out. Elena took his hand, without hesitation. The next morning, Elena woke up earlier than usual. She couldn't pinpoint exactly what had changed, but as she stood in front of the mirror in her worn patrol uniform, she sensed she was no longer the same as the day before. The face staring back at her was still hers, but something had shifted in her gaze, softer, lighter. Perhaps it was because for the first time in a long while, she had allowed herself to live a moment not tied to duty, not burdened by guilt, but simply present. During her shift, she still wrote citations, still directed traffic like any other day. But when she spoke to drivers, her tone wasn't as rigid. A quiet smile appeared now and then after a warning. She remained professional, but she no longer felt like a wall. One colleague even asked, "What happened to you today? You seem different." Elena just smiled. She couldn't explain it fully. She was still learning how to recognize that difference herself. That evening, she visited her mother's home. The familiar scent of soap and old incense lingered in the air, triggering childhood memories. Her mother, Maria, was in the kitchen, tending to a small orchid. Without hesitation, Elena stepped forward and spoke, her voice gentle as if the words had waited long inside her. "Mom, I think we should start having dinner together every week. Tuesdays after my shift." Her mother looked up, surprised, then smiled. A warm smile that held something like forgiveness. "I'll make your favorite," she replied. And for the first time, Elena felt as though she had opened a door that had been closed for far too long. At that very moment, across the city, Daniel sat alone in his father's hospital room. Victor had fallen asleep after his treatment. The room was quiet, filled only with the soft rhythm of the heart monitor. On the table, a stack of pending contracts lay untouched, pushed aside. Daniel looked at his father's tired, aging face and, almost without thinking, whispered aloud, "How long have I been living based on what others expect, without ever asking what I truly want?" He sat still, letting the question echo in the silence. For the first time in years, he wasn't chasing time. He was listening to it. He didn't have the answer, but he knew that, during that sunset with Elena, a very real part of him had come alive. A version of himself that wasn't curated, controlled, or corporate. Now, sitting beside his father, not as a CEO or eldest son, but just as a man, he felt closer to who he was than he had in years. Love between Elena and Daniel didn't arrive like a storm. It came gently, like morning mist, like sunlight slipping through the window on weekend mornings as they sat together drinking coffee, sometimes at their favorite cafe, sometimes on her small balcony. There were no extravagant gifts, no grand promises. But there were rainy evenings when Daniel waited outside her station just to walk her home. There were quiet afternoons when Elena brought a homemade lunch to the hospital and sat beside Daniel while his father slept. They didn't say too much, but every word, every look held a quiet assurance, a presence, and a kind of affection that needed no label. Elena slowly began to shed the invisible armor she had worn for years, no longer keeping everything to herself. Daniel stopped chasing endless schedules to fill his own silences. Together, they learned how to slow down, and more importantly, how to be real. Every time her hand rested in his, Elena didn't feel like the stern officer or the daughter holding everything together. She felt like herself, whole, soft, loved, and loving back in equal measure. It wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy, but each day they shared, Elena realized maybe this was the kind of love she once thought she'd never have. 6 months later, at noon on the same crowded city street, a silver Jeep parked directly beneath the no parking sign. the exact spot where Elena had issued that infamous ticket. Elena frowned at the familiar vehicle. She approached, citation notebook already in hand. The window rolled down, and Daniel greeted her with a grin too innocent to be real. "Really, Officer Torres? No birthday exceptions?" She tilted her head. "Rules are rules, even for birthday boys." Daniel let out a dramatic sigh, though his eyes sparkled. "If you only knew why I parked here." He pulled out a small black velvet box and opened it. Inside was a simple, elegant ring. "Elena Torres, in the exact place where you gave me a ticket and a chance, I want to ask you, would you be willing to join me in all my future intentional violations from now on?" Elena bit her lip, moved but composed, finishing her citation with steady hands. She paused, looking at the paper, then at him. She handed it to him, her eyes shimmering. "Before I say yes, you're going to have to accept just one more ticket." Daniel held the citation like a treasure, then gently slipped the ring onto Elena's finger. She looked at him, eyes filled with a feeling beyond words, then leaned in and kissed him through the window, right there in the middle of the busy street, not caring who watched. She was no longer just the officer with a whistle, and he wasn't the man behind the tinted glass. They were just two people, real, flawed, and somehow finally home. And as they stood there, between rules and emotion, Elena smiled softly and whispered, "In the end, what truly matters is being real." And somehow, on this noisy street, surrounded by chaos, they had found something rare: peace. A peace that began with a ticket and ended with a promise.